Your balls smell like tutti frutti. Mm, possibly. But, oh yeah. 58. I'm planning on leaving mine out overnight. If you do the same, you'll be riding it by tomorrow. Just make sure the troughs are extra chock full of meat cheese. Or it probably just doubled what was on yours plus what was on his. Yeah, it's a lot of digits. Yeah, that's somewhere close to doing something. Yeah, but see, that's kind of like what I meant when breeders start breeding. Eventually, they breed out of mutations, so they get a fresh one and breed their ones with. Because they only need that mutation to hit once, and then they got a way they'll work into getting that new mutated stat bred into all their breeders. So if you have a male that has 500 mutations and a female that has 500 mutations, that new baby is going to have 1,000 mutations. So while they still bred, yes, they have bred those things thousands of times, yes, but you get that many at a certain point, it jumps really quick once you get a set line. You know what I mean? Right, right, or quadruple. It gets complicated, and unless you're selling them for money or you're gonna spend the time to be a top breeder, that shit doesn't matter to us. The only thing that matters is what them stats come out like, and we have the ability to brew. Like, the worst we may ever have to do is uh, get some lower level ones to breed, so we don't eventually hit the top out animal level. Mhm. I mean, you can be a noob and not be an idiot. Especially if somebody's played other games like this, you kind of get the idea of how like they're trading things and Facebook and all that. It's just one for the little animals up on the hill and the shit beetle and stuff. put much of anything in it. I throw meat in it every day or two. The berries are in it, kind of just. I'm pretty sure the peanut syrup there on the hill is the only thing eating the berries out of it. Maybe the occasional shit right by it. Oh, should I come claim these megalosaurs down here? Grab you, free cry pod. Yeah, there's a bunch of extra my little towers over there. I'm not saying you might want to hurry, but you might want to hurry. Just immediately pot them as soon as you grab them. Immediately pot them as soon as you grab them. Definitely gonna want to like when you throw them out, and immediately put food in them. Yeah, yeah, yeah. You're good. I got pretty low. But again, once you throw meat in them, they immediately start eating it. Just maybe not do them all right out at the same time. Start with one, let it heal up a little bit, then do the next one. I mean, you can do it. You just have to be like in one inventory, out the other, in one inventory, out the other. Till they get healed up, then it ain't that as chaotic. Those little power mains, not only do they run those refining forges, but they will run standing torches and campfires too. Hmm. Oh man, those are not done eggs, and at this point, I've got a shitload of loose ones of those eggs. Yeah. No, I had to move my one egg collector because he started picking up the eggs we were trying to incubate. I threw a bunch down the last time I bred a bunch or hatched a bunch of megalos, and I was like, I could swore I put down like twice as many fucking eggs. I was like, were they just in the fridge for so long that they like occasionally they'll just poof? Because the Drake and Wyvern trenches will get real bad for that if like some people would take eggs, and if they were shitty eggs, they were really just trying to get rid of like cycle the spawn. But they would drop egg. They would just drop the egg like middle of the air and shit, and it would just float up there till it spoiled. But the whole time it was spoiling, no new egg was spawning the spawn. It was always was always told it's recommended if you're getting a bunch of eggs and it's just they're shit eggs you don't want to hatch, that you're just trying to cycle the spawn for some better levels, that you just eat the egg. Yeah, 'cause it just immediately is gone. You technically get a little bit of food out of it, but it is, you know, not floating in the sky for 24 hours, causing the spawn to not to redo, and then the other one. Oh, and then sometimes if an egg sit in a place for too long and nobody ever come and picked it up, it would like glitch, and you would pick it up, but then like as soon as you went to go throw it down, it would just poof, instantly like decompose.
Indiana Jones and the Great Circle. No, I'm not talking about Raiders of the Lost Ark or The Last Crusade. I'm talking about that lost indie adventure that happens, you know, right in between there. You know which one I'm talking about? Of course you don't, because this is a brand new game we've all been waiting for. They can't seem to nail down the appropriate Indiana Jones sequel, no offense, Harrison or Mr. Spielberg, but maybe they can do it with a video game. Well, that's exactly what Bethesda and Machine Games intends on doing. I don't know if you've looked at them yet, but the game is getting really positive early reviews. As mentioned, Indiana Jones and the Great Circle is a video game developed by Machine Games and published by Bethesda. If the name Machine Games sounds familiar, it's because they're responsible for bringing Wolfenstein back in the form of Wolfenstein New Order, Old Blood, New Colossus, and Youngblood, all of which were incredibly fantastic and well-received video games. And Machine Games was actually purchased by ZeniMax back in 2010, putting them under the same banner as Bethesda. And then Bethesda was purchased by Microsoft either earlier this year or late last year. I don't know. It went on for so long. I don't remember when it actually went down. But they were purchased, now owned by Microsoft. So if you want to play this game, or at least you want to play this game this year, your only options are either playing it on an Xbox or you can play it on PC. If you have a PlayStation and you want to play Indiana Jones, you can. You just have to wait until next year. Yeah, leave your complaints in the comments below. I'm not Microsoft. I didn't buy the studio. But if I was Microsoft, I probably would have bought the studio. And now down to the dirty work. If you follow my channel or you watch any of my videos, you know I am a mega handheld gamer. I do most of my gaming handheld and I actually prefer it that way. So if you're anything like me, you have the same questions that I do every time a new AAA game launches that I want to play. Will it run on the ROG Ally? Or, you know, this video series used to be, will it run on the Steam Deck? But the Steam Deck is not my preferred handheld of choice anymore. And if you want to know why, you should check out that video. It's in the playlist below. I love the Steam Deck, nothing wrong with it, but this just does a lot more for me. So in this video, we're gonna boot up Indiana Jones and the Great Circle, and we're gonna do it on my ROG Ally. Now, I will say this is a standard Ally, or the Ally Extreme. This is not an Ally X.
That baby gets full grown, it's going to incest with its mama.
Stay tuned for that video. So while doing this experiment, do keep that in mind. If you have an Ally X, however this runs on here, it's probably going to run marginally better on your Ally X. If you missed it in the beginning of the video, the storyline for Indiana Jones and the Great Circle takes place sometime between Raiders of the Lost Ark and the Last Crusade.
I'll be able to do to those Reapers what that guy was doing to him for us, trying to help save our shit.
Between those two movies, but it seems like there's quite a bit of time there. So, and the idea of videos like this is to just boot the game up and let it run in its default
do the farming and I'll
We're not
going
to mess with any of the
settings. And then when we
settings
get you an imprint
yet,
we can just take turns farming.
and we're just going to see how it runs natively on this stuff. Now, I will say, in some of these cases, I've run some of these games, and they've run a little wonky.
And then
after I shoot the video, I go in and I mess with some of the settings and get them to run
don't know if any of the loot is specific
than they did
to
in the video, but the idea of this
certain
video
surface
is
area,
literally run it
or it's
at its
just
default
the drops
state.
that drop
And
on
while
surfaces.
we're doing it, we can
is where you
check
get
out
the
the
good, most of the
beginning
good loot
of
from.
Indiana Jones and the Great Circle, if that's something you've been wanting to do. And don't worry, I'm going to try and steer clear of game spoilers here. We're going to skip through any of the cutscenes.
Memory in my head.
We're just going to get down to the gameplay.
Bigger one just because
I may let the cutscene run out just a little bit in the beginning to see how the frame rate does. But for the most part, what we're looking for here is we're looking to see if the game runs well or
for boss fights and shit.
I'm having a pretty good feeling about this one though. So let's plug this baby
probably why we
in
don't ever
because
see
I am going to run it in
people,
turbo mode, which is 40 watts.
roaming around
and
the
I'm
one
gonna
we go
want to
to a lot, because I'm
plug
pretty
it
sure it is the
in order to
smallest
do
one.
that. If you have an Ally or a Steam Deck for that matter, you know exactly what I'm
It's
talking
not
about. All right, so I am
high traffic.
monitoring the frames per second at the top of my screen right now on the
It probably
menu.
was popping day
It's
one,
running at a solid 29
but that's how all these
frames.
servers
Not what
are.
I would like, but also still playable. Action experience. We're just going to go with default here and do it on moderate. Adventure experience, moderate. Enable HDR, we're not going to do that here. Maybe when I play it on my PC. Picture format, widescreen, of course. What other options?
Oh
We got
yeah, now you
cinematic
watch. We will have
and
trouble
full
getting on
screen.
whatever server
Alright,
we
and
end
I
up
should
on
note,
the new map
the
for the
voice
first couple
of
days to a
Indiana
week.
Jones, not Harrison Ford. Actually, a friend of mine that goes by the
But
name of
maybe
Troy Baker.
best you
We're
can
just
plan
gonna
on the
go
day
real
it
quick
comes
and
out.
see
We're
exactly
trying to
what
put a
settings
good little
we
chunk
have
of time
here.
in
So
on it.
native resolution, widescreen,
Well,
vertical sync.
any point that day, if we log off or get
Depth of
kicked
field
off,
on. Film
it may
grain
be
is
a pain
set
in
to
the butt to get back
25.
on.
Overall graphics
Till
quality
non-peak
on
time.
default, it has it on high. Texture pool size high. Shadow quality high.
But I did message
high.
Daniel earlier and tell him to
Everything
let
is
me know
set
what
to high on default.
extinction server he
Unless,
gets on.
unless it's gonna
Come
putting at
join
19
on the same
frames a
server
second.
with him.
Could be better. 18.
It'd be nice. It'd be nice.
I feel like when we get into some action,
Then occasionally need a little bit of help. He can help
gonna
us,
be running super well.
and we'll already both be established
it
something
handling?
there. So when we get ready to try and do drops,
I mean, it's
and,
smooth. I will say that. I gotta tell you, I have heard Troy's. If you've watched the trailer, I've heard Troy's Harrison, his indie.
element
He's good,
drops
but
thingies
also
we can
Troy's very good at that sort of stuff. So let's get into some action, because right now the frame rate's not the best. The game does look good though. Nice.
have more than just me and you trying to do them.
Nice lighting.
And at some point in between there, maybe we'll go hop on his island server or just find us another
Here we go.
server island center, one of them, and get us some wyvern bread up and get us some gigas bread up.
Okay, now the game is back and running at at about 30
gigas.
frames.
Well, I say gigas. To be honest, these power mains may be a good
I feel like
substitute.
we're about to get to a fight
And
sequence,
Reapers
maybe?
aren't terrible.
Does look like Tony Todd.
Or this shit
This
to do
thing's
the drops
holding
with,
steady
because like
at,
the lower
through this
end
fight
ones,
sequence, it's
a couple
holding
of us
steady at
shit
about
doesn't got to be super
20, it's
tank
ranging
awesome.
between 26 and 30 frames a
But,
second. Indiana Jones.
For the harder
It's already started off
drops
better than
and
the
the
last two
bigger
movies. I will
element
say that.
veins,
So for the sake of this
the
video
dinos
not being 2
will also
hours
be kind of hard
until I
as
get through
well,
some
especially the
actual
drops.
gunplay,
I've only
which
done a
from
couple
what
of
I
the element
understand
veins.
isn't heavy in this game. We're gonna call it right there, and I don't want to
But
spoil
see,
too
there'll
much more.
be
I tried
like
to skip
little
around,
benches
so we didn't have too many
and
story spoilers.
street
But
lamps and a few
as
things
you
like that
saw in the
around
beginning,
a certain
I
area
did check
of
the settings. All the settings, fidelity-wise, graphic-wise, are set to high. That was the default for the Ally.
yeah,
Everything was set
this
to
one,
high,
so
There were a few parts where, if my personal preference, I would have preferred
put art
a
on
little
it.
higher of a frame rate. When we were first going through the jungle, it was dipping down into the teens, 15.
Have you ever seen a
I mean,
plume bird?
honestly, anything below about 25
I'm gonna draw
frames
penis bird
is,
crashing into
in my
his butt cheek
opinion,
mouth.
depending on if it's action or not, a
That's
little
gonna
bit
be the first one.
unacceptable for
'Cause
me.
It's very simple.
But
If you've ever
everything
seen
else
the league,
ran
you know
at
it's
about
hilarious.
30 frames. Now, I know some of you are going to say, "Pah, I could just run it on my Xbox or my PC at 60 or 120 frames." And yeah, you're right. But you're also not going to throw your giant PC or your Xbox in your backpack and travel with it, because this does have offline mode as well. So I could take it with me and play through this entire game. I think if I turned down some of the settings to medium, I could find a really happy place there where the frame rate would probably be somewhere between 30 and 40 frames, which playing a game like this,
that one.
from what I've seen so far, would be totally acceptable. That's like Wolfenstein. You know, you could play through Wolfenstein at 30, in between 30 and 40 frames a second, in my opinion, and have it be totally playable. And everything I have seen so far looks good. It plays well. It's very reminiscent of the movies. They start the game out with that very iconic opening scene as a dream sequence.
I'm gonna paint the option A,
very, very
but I
reminiscent.
totally forgot
It's really
that
given me the
there
indie
was an
vibe.
option B.
But in order to get to some real gameplay with guns and lots of characters on screen, it looks like I'm gonna have to probably put a couple hours into this game, which maybe after I do that, I'll shoot another one of these videos and let you know just exactly how I think it's running at that time. But I have to say for now, just straight base test, booting Indiana Jones and the Great Circle up and letting it run on its default settings on an ROG Ally Extreme, not the X model yet.
Yeah.
I think it runs totally
I'm
fine,
to do
and it's
option B
very
yet.
serviceable. To have a AAA game like this running on a
I've watched a
handheld
lot
device,
of Ink Masters.
telling you, I say this all the time. I think we're
A little
entering
bit
a
of the
really
knowledge has sunk
special
in.
era of games. I was just talking about
I'm
this
still
on a
disappointed
podcast that I did this
that
morning
one penis
with the
didn't
folks over at Retro Dodo.
display properly.
We're in a place right now where your
It
AAA
was
games
such
can
a
now
good drawing. It's
be
like the best
shared
penis I've ever
between,
drawn in a video game. I
PC
think.
or console
Like
and
free-handed,
portable devices,
color.
unlike before with the PSP
Super
and
proud
the
of
Vita,
that penis.
where you had to develop two separate games. If you wanted to play Uncharted on your Vita, you had to have Golden Abyss or whatever the Uncharted Vita game was, and then you had Uncharted 1, 2, 3, 4.
Stairs, so I can
You know, on your console. You
still.
don't need that anymore. You could totally do, this thing can run, you know, something like The Last of Us totally fine. It's very serviceable. And this isn't even the newest one. The Ally X has even a little more power than this. Now, I will say, I am running it in turbo mode, which is 40 watts, and that's why it's plugged in. But the Ally X does boast double battery life, just about. So if you did want to unplug it and play it on the go, you could.
To be honest, what we
Or
probably should do
you
is
could just use a power brick.
get around to
I
logging
use
in
that
with him
Anker
again.
737,
Actually,
I
just
believe.
finding a bed
It'll
somewhere
power
that's
this thing
not going
2
to really
times.
probably get moved or
So,
anything. And
you know, if you want to take
lay
the
'em on the
games
bed and just
on the
leave 'em
go with
there.
you, this is a very viable option. And I would imagine that the Steam
very
Deck,
tape beds
although
up. We'll
I haven't
just
booted
make
it up in a
tape bed
very
and
long
stick
time,
'em in.
if you tweak the settings, it would probably run on a Steam Deck too, or a Legion Go, for that matter. I personally cannot wait to play through this game. I will probably live stream it. I'll probably start live streaming it tomorrow, Sunday. So if you want to check it out before it releases and is still in early access, come hang out on the
wouldn't
Twitch
triple that
stream
till the Green
and
White Ranger stuff comes out.
check a little bit of this game out. Hit the comments
And
and let
even
me
then,
know,
you
is
might not have to
Indiana
trip on it that
Jones
hard,
and the Great
'cause,
Circle a game that you will be checking out? From the first 30 minutes that I've played and the reviews and the previews that I've seen, it's certainly one that I feel good about being excited about, especially for the end of the year. And if you really want to know why I switched from the Steam Deck to the Ally, check out this video right here. It explains it all. And if you don't want to miss videos like this in the future, retro games, modern games, arcade games, and more, subscribe to the channel right here. And until next time, enjoy the journey.
Good. 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 Oh, I look at this other one because it's a fucking twin. Yeah. Those are basically the best 3 stats that I can put on 'em until I raise this new baby and start having her sexed up into her melee start spreading around. To try and get her to give me a male with the health and stamina that we've got, but with her melee, that male will be the sexy time male.
Do you ever wake up and want to play video games all day? Now, I'm sure you do. Any gamer would. Sounds like a dream. But what if I told you that there's somebody that wakes up and plays Sparking Zero from morning to night? It was just another day where I was checking my YouTube comment section until I saw a hate comment. Oh, no, a hate comment. JC, what are you going to do? Well, just wait. He said, buddy, I'd beat you with Hercule and my hands tied behind my back. This one really got to me. So I did something a YouTuber should never do. I added him on Discord and I asked, how many hours do you have? Yep, you're reading that right. The game hasn't even been out for 2 months. Not only is this guy a no-life, but he's also the #2 player in the world with Go Tanks and the only Z rank in the entire world with Go 10. We had a little conversation, and as you can see, this dude is just not nice. So I did the adult thing here. I blocked him and moved on. Guys, don't entertain these I'm kidding. There wouldn't be a video then. No, in fact, I challenged him. What you're about to see are some of my most passionate games in Sparking Zero. Now that you understand what's at stake here, let's get into it. All right, you ready or what?
Ready to clap those cheeks?
Here he is, and here we go, man. All right, man. So, like I said, this dude is the only Z rank in the world with Go 10, and I believe he's also about to hit Z rank with Kid Trunks as well. When I tell you this guy is different, I mean that. I've seen him play. I played him before in the haters video that I made where I played against my haters. And he was very good. He was the kid. Oh my lord. Okay, hold on. Let's lock in real quick. Hold on. So, like I said, this dude is extremely good at the game, very cocky as well, and I kind of want to show him I'm like that.
Oh my god, he on X mode.
Can I get a super counter, please? He has after image, I forgot! Okay, bro, I am low-key kind of getting cooked right now. He's got more key than me, but we're not going to sell this. Okay, we may have sold it.
Damn, he really about to rock my shit.
Okay, it's the first match. It's the first match. It's the first match. That one did not happen. Believe me when I say I'm going to come back and I'm going to beat him more
It's a
than
very
he beat
interesting
me.
little YouTube video I stumbled upon.
I may have gone a little bit cocky, but listen, your boy's different. I will get the best of him, assure that.
It's called WCW Blunders.
Homie drop. I didn't know how legend.
Pretty sure it's a little series this guy done that he can compile into the whole thing in one video, which is nice because then my ads and clicking is very minimal. It just plays. But yeah, it's essentially him going over. It's like, you know, people always talk about good stuff in wrestling, but the bad stuff in wrestling shouldn't be overlooked because it's not only the bad, but it's like comically bad. And WCW was very comically bad before 97, 96, and after 99. And so it's just
Lately, I've been covering a lot of great wrestling shows and great wrestling matches on this channel. From the 1997 stuff on Reliving the War.
there's at least one of those you may be thinking of that they talk about in this little series towards the very end of their before they went out of business. Yeah, because they couldn't do Royal Rumbles the way the Royal Rumble's done without something WCW created. So they always just had Battle Royals. And 9 times out of 10, yeah. Instead of everybody coming to the ring separately, I'm pretty sure they would throw all of them in the ring at one time and go from there.
Sometimes, and hey, we should never take pro wrestling seriously.
Which made for pretty dumb shit for the first 10 minutes of the match, give or take.
With all the great wrestling I've had the privilege of watching over these past few months, I thought it was time to get my hands dirty and watch something bad. And when we think about bad wrestling shows, WCW
Which
Thunder
favorite?
springs to mind instantly. I already talked about how the show was created and how Thunder was more of a headache than an actual opportunity.
Oh,
As time went on,
oh yeah.
Thunder
Damn
would
it.
become
Got
more
got
and more
distracted.
of an
Was that something
afterthought.
else?
Eventually,
Trying to make a
WCW would hold two
cocksucker
episodes of
to eat.
Thunder on one night. The first episode was live, the second was taped for the following week. This sounds straightforward enough, but when you have live nitros going on
No, this
every
should be
week
fine
too, you
there.
gotta be careful about what you put on that taped Thunder show. Everything gets booked in advance, and an injury or
Thankfully,
a
if
short
they
notice
weren't,
change of
yeah,
direction could make Thunder nonsensical. So this
those
leads to
things
the
can be
taped
replaced.
episodes always being
crazy.
uneventful and pretty boring. Kevin Nash talked about this in a shoot interview. He explained how booking 4 live Nitros, 2 live Thunders, and 2 taped Thunders during one creative meeting would cause massive problems, considering the guys who had limited dates, guys who said, that doesn't work for me, brother, guys who got injured, planned title changes, storylines evolving, things of that nature. Planning ahead wasn't a WCW strong point, so the easiest thing to do was to throw together Thunder episodes that didn't mean anything on the grand scheme of things. Still, every now and then they'd try to
So I'm
do
just
something
going to
that was
assume
worth
meat.
watching,
It doesn't
but
say. I
most
can't
of the
see anything
time,
on the one little
especially
wiki
in
page
2000,
about
the shows
anything.
sucked
Fucking
balls. I
even
reached out to you guys to get some inspiration for the hell I'm about to put myself
fucking
through today. I wanted to find the worst episodes of Thunder, or at least some that are
sulfur or
chronically
anything
bad.
fire
I got
related.
some suggestions from viewers. David Arquette winning the world title came up a few times. Someone suggested the final episode of Thunder as being one of the worst.
Let's see what we got.
Covered the October 15th, 1998 Thunder, and people felt that it couldn't get much worse than that. Maybe because it was a gentle reminder of how Thunder was usually a big old load of nothing. As the day went on,
Fish.
more and more suggestions came rolling in, and I thought, hey, this could actually be a series. There's so much crap on WCW Thunder that this is something I could come back to a few times. A dead horse that I could flog over and over
Maybe
again.
raw fish
And
is
then
his
I
preferred.
thought, hey, why just limit this to Thunder? Why not expand this to cover all of the absolute nonsense we witnessed in WCW, especially during the later days? I made a first cut of this video that went on Patreon where I said this will be a Thunder-only show named Thunder Blunder. I also announced this on Twitter, but I'm going to change that. I've dropped Thunder from the name.
As
So
long as it
welcome
eats
to WCW
meat.
Blunder, a mini-series covering all sorts of WCW bullshittery. Yeah, I'm keeping that Blunder name because I like it. WCW Blunder. Now, to be clear, sometimes I'll cover full WCW TV episodes and sometimes I'll just cover moments, matches, and promos if there's enough to talk about. I'm already doing the full episode thing on Reliving the War, so I'll use Blunder to change things up a little and give myself a little more free rein. Although, for episode 1, we are going to check out a whole Thunder episode because this one had a running theme that was truly something else. This is some prime WCW bullshit you're going to see here today, folks. Also, this won't be weekly. I'm not going to put
Stop
pressure on
feeding
myself
that
to put one
baby.
of these out on a schedule, but I do
Blow
want to
its
build
guts
up a
up.
little library of WCW nonsense because there
Yeah.
is
No,
quite a lot
because
to look at.
there's
So
no
the
point
idea
into
started
it.
as
No
a
matter how much you
WCW
can
Thunder
boost it shit up
exclusive
doing
show,
that,
but
it
I've opened up
will
the doors for all sorts of
drop
WCW
back to
shenanigans.
what
Everything's
it's gonna
welcome
be.
on WCW Blunder.
If you look at it now, it's see, it just went from 200 and something immediately back down to like
The 3rd of May 2000 episode of Thunder is what we'll be looking at today.
oh, they're doing some shit like, yeah, I'm gonna beat the system. I'm gonna force feed this motherfucker till his food is full.
It was held in Memphis, but never mind
And
that.
then I
What
watched
exactly
it go
is
from
a New
full
York match?
after force
Well,
feeding it
every
for like
match on
4 or
the show
5
does
minutes
not have a
to
referee, but matches can only end via
whatever it
pinfall
was
or
supposed to be
submission.
because it's a baby.
So who counts the
I was
pinfalls
like,
and who checks
motherfucker.
for submissions? Well, the wrestlers do. Yeah, let that sink in for a moment. You pin your opponent and you count to 3. Easy payday, brother. Fast count that shit and run out of the
This
building.
thing is
This all happened during the Millionaires Club versus New Blood rivalry, so it's straight out of the Vince Russo playbook. Although
where is
Bischoff was
the
also
big
lending
one?
a hand
Is
in
it
the
out up
creative
top,
department
outside
too.
up top?
And really, what we end up with is a perfect example of
Go down
way
for a
too
second.
much chaos creating a messy, incoherent parody of a wrestling show. Now, you might think this actually could be fun, and you might bring up the old, well, at least it's something different argument. I'm guilty of doing that too when I try to see the good in things, but the show feels so out of control, so thrown together, and so
So
ridiculous
yeah,
that it
they're probably the
almost
same
becomes a joke.
stats
But
because
let's see
yours,
how this taped
the
episode of
person that
Thunder
gave it to
all
us,
came
had
together.
100% imprinted on it.
We're 4 days away from Slamboree 2000, the one with the Triple Cage WCW World Title match featuring David Arquette, Jeff
You,
Jarrett, and
you
Diamond
don't
Dallas
get the
Page,
imprint
and
boost
also
from
the one
it.
with
Its
possibly the
stat
worst
still
pay-per-view
has the
poster
imprint
in the history
boosted
of pay-per-view
stats.
posters. Our commentary team of Tony Schiavone, Mike Tenay, and Bobby Heenan hype up the Slamboree main event before letting us know that the
So
Millionaires Club and a few allies are waiting
yeah,
outside for
the
the New Blood
stats
to
that
arrive.
mine
We
have
sail in and
most
pull into the
likely are
arena,
what
the
yours
Millionaires Club in their
were
mates run out,
originally
and
before
they
they
jump
put their
Vince
100%
Russo, Eric
imprint on it.
Bischoff, and a few other New Blood guys who were in the limo, including
Which
Buff
is good,
Bagwell and
which
Shane
means this one
Douglas.
should be
We
about the
come back
same
from a
yours
commercial
was when
break,
Dude
and
gave it
Russo's
to us.
absolutely livid that the
And
New
that
Blood
means
guys
we
who were
should be able to
already in the
replicate
arena
Beast
didn't
pretty
bother to
easily.
help. So he rounds up the troops, and the whole faction goes to the ring to cut a promo. Miss Elizabeth is being held by the New Blood against her will, by the way. We won't get into why, but just keep it in mind. Russo calls out the Millionaires Club and their friends, and Russo says the New Blood is going to war tonight due to the unprovoked attack at the top of the show. Vince is going to put everyone's name in his boot and draw names to face the New Blood. Why a boot and not a hat? I don't know. I'm sure someone had a fucking hat. And Russo says the matches are going to be contested under New York rules. No holds barred, no referee, the wrestlers count the pinfalls. Every match on Thunder will be contested in this fashion, by the way. Well, all except the main event, but that too is a giant clusterfuck anyway, so it doesn't really matter. Ric Flair has some choice words for Vince Russo.
Take a look at who you're talking to, dipshit!
Flair says the elite are standing at the entranceway, and there's no way the New Blood can beat this collection of superstars, so the challenge gets accepted. The babyfaces then storm the ring, and we have another brawl. The New Blood get out of harm's way, and yeah, it's messy. You can see Dallas Page getting frustrated with the amount of people bumping into him. Russo runs away, the babyfaces are left in the ring with security, and 15 minutes have passed on Thunder, including commercial time, and there hasn't been a match yet. Fortunately, a match happens next. It's Double J versus Canyon. Jarrett says he handpicked Canyon to fight tonight on Thunder, so one match in, and that whole thing about pulling names from Russo's boot has already been thrown down the toilet. And yes, I know he's the chosen one, but it still takes away from the whole theme of random guys facing the New Blood. Kimberly then takes time to cut a promo on DDP, and when I say she takes the time, I mean she takes the time. She talks longer than what Jarrett did, and if you combine Kimberly and Jarrett's promos, it's actually longer than the Jarrett versus Canyon match. The match is a whole 3 minutes and 20 seconds. Basically, Kimberly says everything Page achieved in WCW was thanks to Eric Bischoff, and everything he's achieved as a man is because of Kimberly. She calls the fans lame marks. She says Page needs to hurry up with the divorce papers. It all gets zero reaction. Canyon comes out and the two fight outside the ring. We get bumps at the guardrails, bumps at the ring steps. They get inside the ropes where they do some more work before once again going back to the outside. There's more fighting by the guardrails. Jarrett uses a steel chair. And then it dawns on you that every match on this show is probably going to play out in the exact same fashion. I mean, what else can they do except maybe use different weapons? Kimberly tries to get involved, but DDP comes out and he takes away Double J's guitar from his wife. He then gives her a hug, and then he smashes the guitar over her head. That's his wife, guys. Fucking hell. Page then wins the match for Canyon when he hits a diamond cutter on Double J, and Canyon counts his own pin. Gonna be honest, this isn't too bad because it's the first New York Rules match that you'll see on the show, but there's no way this novelty won't wear off by the end of Thunder. So that's 1 point for the Millionaires Club, 0 for the New Blood. Russo is naturally pissed off backstage, but he's going to send the wall out to destroy Lex Luger. Now, it isn't made clear, but this is a tables match that also doesn't have a referee. Obviously, you win by putting your opponent through a table, so you won't need to count.
Yeah, I like that they've got almost all different colors, so you can mix and match ones at some point.
watch this tables match here because there's so many distractions. First, Russo comes down to the ring. This was all
it's
done to
random.
distract Luger. Russo goes on commentary, and then Ric Flair comes down. He too joins the commentary desk just to make sure Russo
Because
doesn't
it's
screw Lex
basically
over.
the
The
same two
competitors in the
color
ring
type.
play nice. They don't use
And
any weapons. They aren't really fighting dirty. There's no issues.
the
On the
ones we
outside,
just
Russo hits
hatched,
Flair with a
they're,
bat.
like,
He
they're
passes the
fairly
bat to the
different
wall,
color.
but the wall drops it when Luger gets him up for the torture rack.
So
Russo
they
ends up
will,
using the bat instead. Vince whacks Luger.
you
Luger
might, you,
falls back, but it's the
breeding
wall
them
that
and
goes
the
through
other
table,
one,
and the
the
total
blue and orange
package
ones,
wins.
might result in,
Russo then challenges Flair to get in the
a
ring.
little
Flair
mixed. Like
jumps
this
in,
one, I
and
think
Russo
he's
then
mixed.
uses Liz
Orange
as a
belly,
shield.
but he's
Liz
got like
kicks
the
Russo
white
with the
back
balls.
kind of.
Buff Bagwell and Shane Douglas then come out to attack Flair, and then Chronic come out to
Yeah, I
attack the
don't
franchise.
know if any of these are actually
Oh, we
event
aren't done yet,
colored.
by the way. Billy
Maybe
Kidman
the
then
blue and
shows up, but
oranges
what do
a
you know?
little,
He stuck his
but
hand in
nothing
Vince Russo's boot,
distinctively
and he
event.
drew out Ric Flair's name. So we now go straight to a Ric Flair versus Billy Kidman match on Thunder.
It was.
I need to take
We'll
a
wait,
break already.
and when we get to the Christmas
So,
event, we'll go
named
start
by Ric
looking for
Flair,
some
they
eggs
kinda
in this ring.
associate Slick Rick with the traditions of the
So
NWA
that way
and the
we'll
early
have a
days of World
chance
Championship
of
Wrestling. Here he is,
getting some
wrestling
event
a
color
Vince
ones.
Russo New York match on Thunder against Billy
Especially
Kidman.
now that it's
Nothing
readable.
against Kidman, by the way. Excellent talent and a standout during these dark days of WCW. But Flair versus Kidman on Thunder in this kind of match in the year
For
2000,
sure, he
it
is a
just doesn't feel
producer
right,
for
does it? To
WWE.
his credit,
He
Flair
produces
bumps around
matches.
quite a lot for Kidman, and everything Kidman does is on
Or
point,
was the
but
last
neither man
time
takes advantage of the no DQ
seen
route.
somebody talk
This
about
is
him.
a standard one-on-one match with no referee, and what's more, there's no pin attempts
He's
at
either
all.
producing
It
for
ends with
them
Conrad and Rey Mysterio
or
hitting the ring to
probably
attack
living
Flair.
a decent
Big
retirement
sexy Kevin Nash
doing
then shows up to help Flair,
conventions
and Conan takes a jackknife.
at his
Kidman
leisure.
goes to leave the arena, but Hulk Hogan then shows up, and he brings
And
Kidman
I imagine
back
he's
down
made
to the
enough
ring. Kidman gets dragged out
between
to safety by
wrestling
Conan
and then
Mysterio. Mike
being
Awesom's music
backstage
then
producer
plays,
shit.
and
Because
for
I'm
whatever
pretty sure he's been
reason,
doing that
he
with
hits the ring
WWE
when
for
three
quite a few
enemies are
years
just waiting to
in
attack
some
him.
capacity
Well,
or another.
seeing as Flair's having a break in the corner. Awesome takes a jackknife. Kevin Nash then says, the winner of this match due to outside
I imagine
interference is Mike Awesome.
he
And
can
I'm
do
not even gonna try
conventions
to make
for
sense of this
pocket
statement. I
money
don't know
and all
what's
his other
going
shit
on.
that's
I
handled
assume Kidman
through
versus Flair is
not
a
being an
no
idiot with
contest.
money.
So much for your New York rules matches. Absolute dog
Don't
shit.
know that he's not an
Someone out
idiot
there's
with
gonna
money,
defend
but
this. I know
considering
there's always
he
people
held a
in the
job with
comments just
WWE
waiting
for
to
many
defend
years in
the
a
honor of
backstage
shit wrestling,
capacity, and
but this show
any
already
current
has me
pictures you
really
see of
annoyed,
him
and I'm the guy who watches Raw
in
night
that
every
capacity,
week, plus
he's got a
pay-per-views
nice,
for
clean,
YouTube
short
videos.
haircut,
We're
wearing a
only at
suit.
the 35-minute mark of this episode of Thunder, and already I want to top out. Diamond Dallas Page versus Vampiro's up next. Another New York match. It sounds interesting enough on paper, but don't get your hopes up because Sting attacks Vampiro during the entrances. We even see Sting getting himself in position for the surprise attack using a black sheet to remain undetected. Fucking hell. Sting grabs a conveniently placed bucket of red liquid, and Vampiro
I like
takes
how
a
this
red
guy, when he
liquid
starts the
bath.
series,
Yep,
it was
that's
supposed to
what
be
it is.
just a
It's
blunder
only
thing
red
for their
Vampiro gets
lackluster
thrown in the ring,
second
Dallas
show
hits the cover
Thunder,
right away,
and then
it's
he
over.
was like, you
The
know
only
what,
good thing
I'm
to
just
come
going
out
to
of
do
this
one
match
for
is
all
this
of
shot right
WCW.
here. What a glorious waste of TV time. The babyfaces now have 3 victories, while the New Blood have 1. Russo's again shown backstage, and he's calling his team a bunch of losers. I mean, listen to this guy scream. The babyfaces, meanwhile, they're having a great old time. So, you're Vince Russo in this predicament.
Like,
Your
he was
boys are
so
getting
bad for
completely wrecked, and you've lost
WCW
3
at the
out of
end
4
that
matches.
some
You're
people
gonna send
to
out one
this
of your
day
biggest bass
swear
dudes, and you're gonna
he was
manipulate the
basically
crowd so
sent
they
there
can
by
claim an
Vince
easy victory,
McMahon
right?
to
I mean, you're fucking
finish the
squealing
company
backstage
off,
like a child about your team
like
sucking
just
balls.
sending him to the
So
toilet.
what do? Well, Russo decides to
When
send Mike
realistically,
Awesome to the ring.
he's a
He sent
guy
Mike
that
Awesome,
could
who just got
have
destroyed by
some of
Kevin
his
Nash
ideas were
under
pretty
10
good
minutes
because
ago.
again
And Mike
he's a
Awesome
big
announces that he drew
idea
Sting's
person that
name
got
out of Russo's
the
big
Attitude
smelly
Era
book.
started in
Real bad for
WWE.
real work. Sting
They
wrecks
always
Awesome
had
during
Vince
the opening
McMahon
minutes of the
to
match. Mike goes to the outside
rein
and
in
gets
some of
attacked by
his
Misfits in
ideas
action. These guys were
and
shit canned on the previous
pick
episode
it
of
apart
Nitro.
in the
The
right way to
Misfits
be
throw
like,
Awesome back in the ring.
I don't know if we're
Sting
going to do it
hits 2
this way,
stinger splashes.
but
He
let's
applies the
kind of
Scorpion
run
Death
with a
Roll,
little
and
bit of
Awesome
that,
taps out.
but do
It's a
this,
small nitpick here,
and
but
not
Russo
all of it
didn't
worked for
mention
them
anything
either,
about
but
submissions when talking about how a New
you
York
could
rules match plays
tell
out, but we'll ignore that.
once he
2 minutes and
came
15
to
seconds,
WCW
almost
and
a
ended
whole
up on
1.5
TV,
minutes
the
longer
shit
than the
just went off the
DDP versus
rails.
Vampiro match. These New Blood losers better get it
As
together
somebody
because
that
Russo's
watched both
plan has
of
been
them pretty
absolutely shit so
regularly,
far. This is a
even by
job
that point,
for
I
Scotty
could tell,
Steiner.
like, what the fuck are they doing here? Let's go and flip the
Big
channel
Papa
over
Pump
to
tells Russo
Raw
not to touch
and
him.
watch Good
He'll
Wrestling.
go out and have a match, but he isn't doing it for Vince, he's doing it for himself. Steiner comes out and he tells Hulk Hogan to get his ass in the ring.
They
So
want
much for
certain
drawing
people
names. Old Mike
having
Awesome got
matches
the short
against
end of
each
the
other in
stick, didn't he?
WCW.
Steiner says he and
It
his
was
freaks
usually
will
pretty
visit
curd at
Hogan's
that
house
point.
after the match, and Big Linda's gonna call Scott the big bad booty daddy. This was one of the best things about this entire episode of Thunder. Out comes Hulk Hogan, and Steiner doesn't get in a single piece of offense to start this one off. Absolutely nothing. The fight goes to the crowd where Hugh Morris shows up, and it becomes a 2-on-1 match. Two babyfaces versus one heel, mind you. Scott does manage to hit a double low blow followed by a double clothesline. He calls for someone, anyone from the New Blood to come out and help him, but no one shows up. When Hulk and Morris fight back and when it's made clear that Scott isn't winning, Big Papa Pump decides to just leave the ring. And that's how this match ends. I don't even know what I'm watching anymore, and why can't the New Blood win any matches? Why is this so one-sided? Another limo pulls up outside the arena. FUNB can be seen on the front plate. We'll see who gets out of the vehicle later on. Tag Team Champion Shane Douglas and Buff Bagwell take on Chronic next. Another New York match. And well, this one is actually mildly entertaining, and honestly, this is where a New York rules match could actually work, because you don't need to tag your opponent in, and your teammate has to perform the 3 count. This isn't a bad idea at all for a tag team match type, and if done with the right teams, it could be interesting. They don't do a terrible job here on Thunder either, but there isn't enough near falls. Chronic win the match, but they don't win the tag team titles, even though they take the belts after the match. Okay, Russo's plan completely backfired, almost to the point where the New Blood feel like sympathetic babyfaces. There's still 30 minutes left on this episode of Thunder, and WCW decide to just completely top out and put everyone in the ring for a battle royal. It's kind of like when you create a pay-per-view in a wrestling video game and you run out of ideas, so you just say, fuck it, battle royal, that'll pop a rating for sure. Before we go to the ring, a bus pulls up behind the limousine. Eric did talk about bringing in backup, so who's in the limo and who's in the bus? We'll find out in a moment. Eric Bischoff challenges the Millionaires Club and their buddies to step in the ring for a big old hardcore fight. And Ric Flair says that'll only happen if it's a battle royal with the winner getting a world title shot. Bischoff and Russo agree, so we have ourselves a hardcore battle royal. And look at this, just look. Bischoff said before the bout it was 11 New Blood versus 11 babyfaces, but 41 guys end up getting involved in this match, and what's more, it takes ages for guys to start getting eliminated. So you're watching guys trying to find space while throwing punches. And yeah, this is generally what happens in all battle royals, but they drag this out for so long that it makes you wonder, why did they rush through the earlier matches? In the middle of the battle royal, the Mamalukes and the Harris brothers join the fight. Harlem Heat's music then plays, and then you remember that this is WCW in 2000. It's Stevie Ray and Ahmed Johnson, not Stevie Ray and Booker T. Cash is also here, and so's Norman Smiley. He must have become an honorary member of Harlem Heat Incorporated for this episode of Thunder. And just look at the state of this now. Jesus Christ. Tank Abbott then comes down, people start getting eliminated, but it's not happening quick enough. There's still no room for guys to do anything at all. Medusa, Asia, and Mona get involved. Hacksaw Jim Duggan runs down to do some damage. And then the guy from the limousine steps out and he begins heading to the ring. And it's the Macho Man Randy Savage. I know, right? How dare I shit on an episode of Thunder that has the return of Randy Savage? Well, don't you think there'd be a much better way to use Savage than have him get involved in this absolute mess of a match? And this is also Randy's final WCW appearance. What a way to go out in the clusterfuck battle royal. He hits 9 double axe handles. And then he exits the ring via the middle rope to fight on the outside, and that's the Macho Man's involvement completely done with. He doesn't get back inside the ropes until after the match. Bret Hart then shows up and he clocks Hogan on the back with a chair. Hulk rolls under the bottom rope, and he too doesn't get back in the ring. I then started questioning if this Battle Royal wasn't actually over the top rope, but it was. Savage and Hogan were the only guys who didn't go over the top. It comes down to Flair and Shane Douglas. Vince Russo runs down to hit Flair with a bat, but he ends up hitting the franchise. The cameras completely miss this. Flair chases Russo out of the ring, he hits Douglas, and Flair wins the Battle Royal and he wins a title shot. Another loss for the New Blood. On the outside of the ring, Bischoff hits Hogan with a bat, but this too is missed by the cameras. What's going on? For whatever reason, Kidman covers Hogan and Bischoff counts to 3. I'm not even gonna question it anymore. DDP and Jeff Jarrett fight on the entranceway scaffold. David Arquette is supposed to come out and hit Jarrett with the guitar, but he fucking falls through the gimmick stage floor. You couldn't make this up. The commentators pretend he was never there, and the cameras quickly cut over to Randy Savage helping Hulk Hogan. Clearly, the show was supposed to end with the big bump off the scaffold, but since Arquette fell through the fucking floor, they just cut to Jeff Jarrett standing on the stage, and then the show fades to black.
And DDP and Jarrett continue their battle.
So the show did have Randy Savage, Bret Hart, and Scott Steiner saying Linda Hogan's gonna call him the big bad booty daddy. I'll give it that much, but my god, what a train wreck. I feel annoyed that I watched this show. I feel tired after watching this show. I've wasted time scripting this upload, gathering clips, double checking that Arquette actually fell through the floor. I wanted to watch some absolutely awful wrestling, and I definitely got what I asked for. So that was the first episode of WCW Blunder. I hope you enjoyed it. I've got a list of episodes, matches, and promos I'm going to cover.
Well, you hadn't logged off yet, right? Or did you log out and log back in? Okay. That's why it's still on your shoulder.
This isn't going to run long. It's just
You log out,
it's
it's going to
drop
drop right on
and there maybe only be 2 episodes a month, maybe less. Maybe I'm feeling particularly awful about myself and I'll do 3. But let me know what WCW blunders that you want.
Yeah, they'll stay up there
remember,
when you're just laying down. You
log
log out.
Covered your request already. Thanks for watching episode 1. Avoid this episode of Thunder at all costs and take care. Welcome back to WCW Blunder, the series where we take a look at some of the mishaps, mistakes, and general nonsense that graced our television screens when WCW was in business. As mentioned in episode 1, this was going to be a WCW Thunder exclusive show, but I wanted to include all of WCW programming in this series because I may have been limiting the potential of the series by just having Thunder matches and moments. So today, we're going to look at 2 shows that didn't even take place on the Turner Network. You've probably heard of these before, but if not, you're going to be seriously confused. WCW Snow Brawl and WCW Beach Brawl were shows that aired on MTV. The channel would have theme blocks of programming during spring, known as Spring Break, and another in winter, known as MTV Snowed In. During these blocks, MTV would alter their usual shows to fit in with the theme. So, for example, there was a snowed in version of Total Request Live, but MTV also put on other shows to fit the programming theme, and you guessed it, they partnered up with World Championship Wrestling to put on a few events. Both events, if you can even call them events, happened in 1999, with Snow Brawl airing on the 6th of February and Beach Brawl airing on the 12th of March. Now, this all sounds absolutely fine, right? It's exposure for WCW on a different channel, and it's even more pro wrestling for us to sit and enjoy. Well, no, these shows were the absolute shits. I'll say this before getting started though, one thing I do like about these shows are the venues themselves. I do like when wrestling rings get taken out of arenas and put in unique locations, so that part is good. The rest, terrible, absolutely terrible. Let's get started and we'll take a look at these two abysmal shows. Before that though, I covered the other MTV WCW show quite a while back, the Ultimate Video Bash, so you can watch that when you get done here. Snow Brawl takes place in the Snow Summit Mountain Resort in Big Bear Lake, California. The 20-minute broadcast opens up with 3 Nitro girls dancing in the ring to The Offspring's Pretty Fly for a White Guy. That's maybe another positive from these shows, the fact that actual released music could get played and not music from the Turner Audio Library. Whether you care much for The Offspring or any other music you hear in the show is another question. Only 3 Nitro girls though. I think that's Spice, Shay and Whisper. Don't quote me on that though. I need to brush up on my Nitro girls knowledge. We go to our commentary team of Larry Zbyszko, Jimmy Hart and Rob Zombie. Jimmy Hart puts Rob over as a legend of heavy metal. He's holding a snowflake trophy. Yeah, a snowflake trophy. And he says we're going to see a 7-man battle royal tonight. I guess the winner becomes King Snowflake. Why 7 guys? Couldn't they get at least another 3 people in to make it a 10-man battle royal? Larry Zbyszko, who doesn't look too thrilled to be at Snow Brawl, explains the rules of a battle royal, probably for those who have no idea what wrestling is, or those who have no fucking idea why this is on their TV screens. And Rob Zombie is actually okay here. He doesn't ham it up, and he gets the job done.
Oh, it's got to be the most violent, brutal display of carnage and carnality to happen all weekend at Snowed In. So, Jimmy, take it away.
We go to Stuttering John from the Howard Stern Show. John's our ring announcer, and boy, does he have some shit jokes for us today. Here's a few of his ring announcements.
Wrestler stands 6 foot 2 inches, weighs 250 pounds, and would love to kick Marilyn Manson's ass. He has Sandra Bullock's home phone number and refuses to use it. On his way to the ring now is a man that would love to get his hands on those little Hanson kids.
Eventually, he just gives up and the jokes stop by the time the last entrant comes to the ring. The first guy to enter this battle royal is Conan. He comes to the ring, he cuts his promo.
But more important than all that, Big Bird's body that.
And out next we have Kenny Chaos. Something tells me we aren't going to see Goldberg, Sting and Hollywood Hogan at this show. Disco Inferno comes out next. Jimmy Hart says Disco is now in the NWO as the luggage carrier for Scott Hall and Kevin Nash. Don't hold back there, Jimmy. Cruiserweight champion Billy Kidman is going to take part in this mess. Brian Adams, representing NWO Black and White, he comes out and he cuts a promo. Brian Adams cutting a promo.
When you announce a member of the New World Order, show a little more passion, okay? Or I'll cure your stuttering problem by slapping the taste out of your mouth.
Adams says he's very impressed with the resort. He's never seen so many geeks, punks, and weenies in one place at the same time. He says he'll be practicing his clotheslines later on the snowboarding and skiing gigs at the bottom of the hill. The NWO went all out for this one, didn't they? The White and Black sent Brian Adams, and the Elite sent Disco Inferno. Wrath is our next entrant. Rob Zombie has said a few times that Stuttering John looks nervous in the ring, but I think the guy just doesn't want to be there. The final entrant is Booker T, and that's your 7 guys. Conan, Kenny Chaos, Disco, Kidman, Adams, Wrath, and Booker. It isn't a list of nobodies, but it isn't a list of main event talent at that time either. It gives the impression that WCW didn't care about this show, or the big dogs on the big contracts simply turned it down, or they just weren't asked to go. With that in mind, we all know who would have been perfect for this. Glacier. Not only would old Frosty Balls be right at home in these cold temperatures, but he also fit the bill as a mid-card guy. Hell, he was lower mid-card at this point. Glacier could have won this thing and revitalized his career with his Snowflake trophy, but someone clearly didn't think ahead. Could have been the greatest thing that Glacier ever achieved. We're about to go to commercial break. We see the Nitro Girls dancing before we cut away. We come back, and the first thing we see is some dude wiping out on the slopes. Let that be a sign of things to come. And the Nitro Girls are still dancing, this time to the Backstreet Boys. What's a bit concerning is that this thing is already at the halfway point, and we're yet to see any.
I mean, the smaller the promotion, the more relevant those guys
they were
will
promoted
be.
as such honestly, I don't even know what these should
Because
be
it's a
classed
name
as.
to
I'd
draw
probably
people.
file them
Yeah.
under the
Oh,
giant
I've never
waste of
seen
fucking
Glacier.
time
Maybe this
category.
show won't be
After
too
the
bad.
dance, Whisper gives Rob Zombie a
Forget
bite
the
to eat.
Glacier's like 50 something, and
You. I have some food.
maybe if he kept in really good shape,
Fucking
he can
hell,
still
Jimmy.
do his
And the
kung
match
fu
gets
kicks and
underway not
stuff.
by ringing a
Yeah,
bell, but
some of
with
that.
Rob Zombie killing
But
a pigeon.
he probably ain't hitting the mat too many
So
times
here
in
we
that
go,
match,
a match with
most
what Jimmy
likely.
Hart called some of the biggest stars in WCW, while the Deftones' My Own Summer plays in the background. I like how the wrestlers kind of delay at the beginning, as if to say, oh, we're supposed to have a match now, aren't we? You can tell the usual WCW production team didn't work on this. The camera work isn't what we're used to, and the camera cuts are also a bit messy. And if you think this is bad looking, wait until you see Beach Brawl. It's all strike moves to start us off, punches, kicks, chops, nothing much in the way of actual wrestling. The guys team up on Disco Inferno for a bit, and when Raph decides to perform the meltdown, you know, a wrestling move, the rest of the guys are like, oh no, no wrestling moves in this one, lad, out you go. Raph ends up being the first guy eliminated. Kidman kicks the shit out of Disco in the corner, and Conan ends up hitting Disco with the face jam, or X Factor, or K Factor, whatever. First wrestling move of the match though. Conan then eliminates Kenny Chaos, Kidman hits a Hurricane Rana on Adams, and Conan continues to stand out by hitting his rolling clothesline. Unfortunately for K-Dog though, he gets eliminated next when NWO guys Brian Adams and Disco Inferno team up. We come back from a commercial break and Billy Kidman gets eliminated by Booker T's spinning heel kick. Disco and Adams then team up and they go after Booker. Booker manages to hit a double clothesline, but it's not enough. Disco and Adams throw Booker over the top rope, so it all comes down to two NWO guys. The illustrious, historic WCW Snow Brawl Battle Royal ends when Disco can't stop himself from dancing, so Adams lifts him up and Disco gets thrown into the snow. I was about to say that this is the only thing of relevance Brian ever won in WCW while he was in the NWO, but this thing was far from relevant. I was also going to say that WCW pissed away an opportunity here to showcase their brand of pro wrestling to a wider audience, or at least an audience who would never dream of watching pro wrestling, but I honestly don't think they gave a shit. As Disco gets whacked with snowballs, Jimmy Hart and Rob Zombie get in the ring to present Adams with his Snowflake Award. Adams calls the fans little people, and he thanks himself for looking so good. And then, oh, who's this? A surprise at WCW Snow Brawl? Who could it? Oh, it's Conan. Fuck's sake.
NWO, you can bow down, toss my salad, and peel my potato.
The Beastie Boys body moving plays, Conan lifts the Snowflake trophy, and that's it over. It looked like a terrible amount of effort with getting the ring set up and whatnot for very little payoff. I'm sure regular viewers of MTV didn't care, WCW fans didn't care. I don't think
Come
the
on,
guys
Conan
involved
in the
cared, but
snow
hopefully they had
episode.
a night at the ski resort at least. Positives to take away would be the location and how the show
Let them
looks.
not break.
WCW were always better than the WWF when it came to unique venues, so I'll give it that. Rob Zombie was also pretty decent on commentary, and I've got nothing else. Watch it for how unique it is as a wrestling broadcast, but don't watch it for anything else. So a few months later and we have the WCW MTV Beach Brawl. No lessons were learned. This one is even further away from being an actual wrestling show. Cancun, Mexico is our location, and once again, it looks unique and it looks different, so points for that. The show starts again with 3 Nitro girls dancing in the ring, and our commentary team this time consists of Jimmy Hart, Raven, and Kid Rock.
Wrestling freaks of America, welcome to MTV's Beach Brawl. I'm Kid Rock with the legendary Jimmy Hart and my main man Raven from World Championship Wrestling.
Whereas Rob Zombie kept it simple, Kid Rock is, well, he's being Kid Rock. He briefly tells us how a battle royal works.
Nah, I think it's just a visual thing.
Left standing when the music stops. Last one when the music stops. Got that?
So, last
What are you
man
doing?
standing when the music
If I can, I'll
stops.
do what I
Well,
want.
there's
It's
two
hot and
people left
warm.
standing when the music
Hot
stops.
Pocket, it's ready.
Ignore this anyway. It's just another battle royal. Only this time there's 6 guys.
I
who
just
agreed
walked
to do
up
this
towards
thing,
it.
and not 7. Kid Cox says there's a
Trying to
slamming
get stuck
band
in
who's
it.
going to give us a beat while the wrestlers take a beating. Very good. And that slamming band is Fear Factory. Jimmy Hart then shows us the coveted, much sought after Beach Brawl trophy, and he says only the meanest, baddest guy will leave Beach Blast with this in their hands. Raven then talks about Battle Royal matches.
The last man standing is the winner. You gotta toss everybody out. It's the last man standing, like that Bruce Willis movie. Of course, that thing didn't do any box office, but that thing sunk faster than the Titanic. I don't even want to get into that.
Yeah, Raven's loaded at spring break. Kid Rock then compares pro wrestling to pimping.
Like, wrestling's a game of quickness, agility, all that. You got to know when to make your moves, kind of like macking, you know, kind of like pimping, right? Is that correct?
Pimping ain't easy.
Okay, I got that.
Fear Factory then get interviewed. They say Chris Jericho is a Fear Factory fan. Of course he is. But Fear Factory are fans of the Nitro Girls, so fuck you, Y2J. Kid Rock then introduces the wrestlers. Billy Kidman managed to get suckered into another one of these shit shows, and we learned that Billy Kidman's favourite band is the Beastie Boys. Kid Rock says Kidman's beastly in the ring. Hugh Morris's favourite music video is the Ramones' Rock and Roll High School, and Kid Rock says if Morris had his way, he'd make mincemeat out of Marilyn Manson. The same thing that Conan apparently said at Snow Brawl.
And if he had his way, he'd make mincemeat out of Marilyn Manson. Well, go figure that out.
Weighs 250 pounds and would love to kick Marilyn Manson's ass.
Sounds like some MTV jagoff who didn't like Marilyn Manson wrote these cue cards. Morris wears a Fear Factory shirt to the ring, and Raven rips him apart for doing so, saying it's bad form to wear a band shirt at one of their gigs. Apparently, Rey Mysterio's favourite band is Pantera, and his dream tag team partner would be Snoop Dogg. Kid Rock says that Chris Jericho is a Metallica freak, even though it says his favourite band Skid Row on the screen. And Chris cuts a promo after making his entrance. It's probably the best thing about this show. Chris gets the audience fired up. He asks if the fans are having fun, and then he swerves the crowd.
We know what the problem with all that is you should all be home trying to increase your intelligence and quit wasting your parents' money.
He does have a point there.
Chris says these people will end up taking orders at Harry's Burgers if they don't change their ways. Raven wonders where this burger establishment is because he's never heard of it. Chavo Guerrero's favourite music video is Michael Jackson's Thriller, and Perry Saturn likes AC/DC and Marilyn Manson. There's Marilyn Manson again. Saturn's all over the ring girl, and Raven cheers him on from the commentary table. And then we go to commercial break, but first, Kid Rock's just gotta be Kid Rock.
Stick around like some Backstreet Boys groupies. Stay tuned to MTV's Beach Brawl. Right here in Cancun, mother...
We come back, we get more Nitro Girl dancing. Jimmy Hart thinks either Hugh Morris or Chris Jericho is going to win this thing, while Raven gives us a tri-cast. He thinks Morris is going to win, Kidman's going to place, and Saturn will show. The match gets underway, not with a ring bell, not with a pigeon falling out of the air, but Kid Rock saying this.
So here we go. Fear Factory, make like Jenna Jameson's in front of you and hit it!
So Fear Factory begin playing as the match gets underway, and look at the camera cuts here. If you tuned in to see WCW wrestling, you aren't going to see much of it. If you tuned in to see Fear Factory, you're not going to see much of them either. If you wanted to hear Fear Factory's live performance, then you'll have Jimmy Hart, Raven, and Kid fucking Rock talking all over the audio. So it begs the question, who exactly was this aimed at? It pleases nobody. The camera cuts make the wrestling match really difficult to talk about, but I'll give it a shot. Saturn hits a leg drop on Mysterio, and Kid Rock calls this an ass cracker. Mysterio sets Kidman on the top rope, and the wasted Raven says this.
Rey Mysterio Jr. up to the top. Here we go. Should be some sign of Karana, or however you pronounce it.
Mysterio and Kidman stay perched on the top rope for ages, maybe waiting for a cameraman to come back or something, I don't know. But in that time frame, Hugh Morris pulls off an elbow drop on Chavo, and then Mysterio pulls off a top rope bulldog. It begins to feel like a clip show as we see Saturn pull off a Falcon Arrow, and then he performs a top rope leg drop. The cuts to Fear Factory are really, really annoying. Saturn and Hugh Morris fight on the outside, and Raven does not give a flying fuck about this match. He wants to know where the party is after the show.
So, not to interrupt the action, but what's the party scene after this? Where are you going?
Yeah, really, let's get down to business, right? What's going on later today?
Absolutely.
Jimmy Hart hasn't said half as much as what he did at Snow Brawl. Either it's due to editing, Kid Rock getting on his nerves, Raven's unprofessionalism, or Jimmy can't keep his eyes off the spring breakers in attendance. Morris has a perfect chance to eliminate Mysterio, but he decides to throw him onto Kidman and Chavo instead. That makes absolutely no sense. Morris then misses the no laughing matter moonsault, and the rest of the competitors decide to gang up and throw Morris out. The show then goes to commercial break. We come back and the focus is immediately put on Fear Factory. You could be a Fear Factory fan and this is what you wanted to see, so you gotta be fair too. When we get to in-ring action, Saturn has his dress over Jericho's head and Raven thinks this is amazing. Chavo gets eliminated by Jericho. The commentators have a little fun at Chavo's expense.
Hey, Chavo, beat it, Chavo, beat it. Beat it.
Yes.
Don't make me stand up. I'm commentating. I'll pull it. Don't make Raven get up and
Yeah,
get
he should
you,
be fine
man.
for the night.
Don't even come over here with
I'm
that.
gonna leave mine
And
out
man,
for
I
the
think
night.
Chavo would fuck Kid Rock up.
Chavo's
Saturn
really
hits a
good.
great looking German suplex in the ring on Mysterio. And what's evident here is that the guys are actually working hard in the ring, but the production style is doing the match no favors at all. Snow Brawl was presented way better, but the wrestling wasn't nearly as good. Jericho eliminates Kidman.
What?
Ray gets a good look of Saturn's dress next, and Jericho then eliminates Saturn. It comes down to Jericho and Mysterio, and again, it looks like they're doing some good work against each other, but you don't really get a good look
Maybe
at
get a
the
little bit of
action.
meat.
Ray hits an Arabian press moonsault, and he follows this up with a Bronco Buster. Jericho ends up catching Ray, and he gets crotched on the top rope, and Mysterio ends up getting eliminated. Chris Jericho's the king
Nighttime.
of
The one thing
spring
about
break.
this
As
one
the
little
crowd chants
bulldog
Jericho sucks, Jericho accepts his award.
finish minuscule, and then just the two reapers grab the rod meat.
That's good. Saturn ends up hitting the ring to attack Chris, just like Conan did to Adams at Snow Brawl. The trophy ends up getting destroyed and it's thrown into the sea where it rightfully belongs. It's now buried treasure. Pirates have tried to find the coveted Beach Brawl trophy for over 20 years and it still hasn't been located. Kid Rock tells the fans that there's a party in his room tonight and everyone's invited, and the show ends with another dance from the Nitro Girls. I honestly think Raven was completely checked out of WCW at this point, and he'd only last for another few months anyway before packing his bags and rejoining ECW. As for Chris Jericho, well, when he won this thing, he already informed Eric Bischoff that he wasn't signing a new contract. Chris wrote in his book, I wrestled a battle royal during MTV Spring Break in Cancun. I won and went out drinking for 14 hours straight with the host, a relative unknown named Kid Rock, who I referred to as Rock Kid in celebration. Only in WCW could you get a bigger push and a hell of a party when you were leaving the company. I'm not so sure this was a push, Chris. I think WCW just didn't give a shit either way. So, another waste of time, another WCW blunder. MTV execs knew that wrestling was hot around this time period, and even years later, they'd pick up the unintentionally hilarious Wrestling Society X and air around 9 or 10 episodes of that, although they went a step further with added audio and visual effects. Snow Brawl and Beach Brawl took place when everyone wanted a piece of the wrestling pie. And well, both shows let us see how production can suffer when wrestling falls into the hands of folks who never produced a wrestling show before.
MTV run
And I get it too.
show. Yeah, I'm
These
pretty
were
sure I
made for
watched a couple
MTV.
episodes of
They
that.
were MTV productions featuring WCW wrestlers, and they were broadcasted on a music channel. Well, it used to be a music channel.
I remember
This
for
isn't Multi-Nitro, and this isn't even Thunder, but you're still expecting something,
more than
anything
usually
from this.
obvious
Wrestling and music
scripted
managed to coexist
wrestling
15
show.
years earlier, and the whole WWF MTV Rock and Wrestling thing helped to bring attention to the World Wrestling Federation, but I think the WCW and MTV partnership would have honestly turned people away. I mean, who would have watched this and said, yeah, I'm going to start watching WCW every Monday night? It's fucking baffling to think that these shows really benefited nobody. Not MTV, not WCW, not the wrestlers involved, not the fans, not Kid Rock, not Raven, not the guy who fell off when snowboarding. Nobody. Maybe a better idea would have been to have one singles match at Snow Brawl where the heel wins, have the rematch build up on Nitro, and then host that match on MTV Beach Brawl. I don't know, anything has to be better than 6 or 7 man battle royals for shitty trophies. That'll do it for this one, though. I don't know what else to say. Absolute crap. I've saved you the trouble of watching the whole shows yourself, but if you really must see these in their entirety, then don't say I didn't warn you. Thanks for watching, guys, and take care. Lex Luger's time as an active professional wrestler is really fascinating to look back on. It feels like at certain points of his career, Lex really had it all. His early work in the NWA has been praised as some of the best work of his entire career, and he had a true resurgence and genuine unmanufactured popularity in WCW from mid-1996 onwards. Looking back at Lex's work during this time period on Reliving the War proves that there's many misconceptions out there about Luger. Yes, the Lex Express stuff in the WWF is worthy of criticism, but he was red hot during the early days of the WCW NWO feud. As time went on and as WCW started to change and go through its own highs and lows, Lex tried to change with the times too. He became part of the NWO Wolfpack, the red and black version of the NWO that also became very popular. But when the NWO stuff started to dry up and when WCW attempted to build a future that didn't involve its most popular storyline and faction, Lex went through another change. Now, I'm not saying that Lex should have been winning world championships at this point, and I'm not saying Lex could have reverted back to a 1997 babyface and carried the company into the new millennium, but what you have to understand before continuing on here, and what you have to keep in the back of your mind as we look at this character evolution, is that Lex Luger was once one of WCW's most beloved superstars, and that's not an exaggeration. Again, those who join me every week for Reliving the War would know that Lex had an incredible following, and if you don't believe me, just watch his appearances in matches during 1997. Trust me, I too was part of the echo chamber when it came to Lex Luger, but watching it all back made me realize that superstars today would kill for the same crowd reactions that Luger received. No one will ever consider Luger the greatest wrestler in the world, let's make that clear, but Lex was ultra over. He could have been someone the company went back to if they just kept him a straight babyface, but this is late WCW we're talking about here. Lex would get injured at the beginning of 1999, and when he came back later in the year, he said the old Lex Luger was dead while promising to show us the next evolution of his character. The presentation was a little weird, the change itself was forgettable, and it could very well be argued that the Lex Luger we're going to look at today is the worst Lex Luger to grace our TV screens. Okay, first of all, the injury that happened on Thunder. Lex was preparing for a tag team match at Super Brawl 9 against Conan and Rey Mysterio. Kevin Nash was going to be his partner. On the February 18th, 99 edition of Thunder, Luger got legitimately injured when Rey Mysterio slammed a limousine door into Luger's biceps. Luger was taken out of the Super Brawl match, although he still made an appearance at the show. Luger had to take time off, and during his time away from the ring, WCW went through drastic changes. You'd think you were watching a completely different wrestling company by the time Luger came back. Sting was getting ready to wrestle Hulk Hogan on the August 23rd episode of Nitro, and Lex Luger came back to warn Sting not to trust the Hulkster. Hogan was back in the red and yellow, and this didn't sit well with Luger. Sting said he had to take the title opportunity and he didn't really have any other option. Right enough, there was interference during the Sting vs. Hogan main event, and Sting didn't win the championship, but it wasn't instigated by Hogan. Goldberg and Luger come out to clear the ring. Hogan promises to give Sting another shot, and he also says Luger and Goldberg can watch their backs while they have the match. The next week, Luger cut a promo with Mean Gene Okerlund, and he said he had undeniable, concrete, irrefutable evidence that Hulk Hogan was a con man, that Hulk Hogan was still up to no good, and that Hulk Hogan was scamming everyone. Luger said the evidence was going to arrive to Monday Nitro, and all the fans had to do was wait. Hogan came out later and he pretty much said he doesn't care, his hands are clean and Luger has nothing on him. Hulk says he'll wait in the back and see what Lex Luger produces. Lex comes back out later and he wants Sting to join him in the ring. Luger's holding an envelope, and Luger says inside the envelope is proof that Hulk Hogan was pretty busy while he was out rehabbing his injured knee. Back in June, Kevin Nash was hit by a Hummer while Big Sexy sat in a limousine. We thought this storyline had been dropped when Kevin Nash battled Randy Savage, the man who orchestrated the attack, but the true identity of the driver was never revealed. Lex shows Sting what's in the envelope, and there's Hulk Hogan in an NWO shirt standing beside the white Hummer. Hogan comes out and he says this doesn't prove anything. Luger says Hulk tried to end Nash's career, and Sting seems to side with Luger here. Tempers begin to flare and security steps in. And at the very end of Nitro, Sting goes into Hogan's dressing room, and who does he find sitting there? The Macho Man Randy Savage. The next week, Hogan said the photo was doctored. Hogan does indeed drive a Hummer, but his Hummer doesn't match the one that hit Nash back in June. Sting and Luger want to discuss the photo with Hulk backstage, and the two visit Hogan's locker room. Bret Hart's here having a conversation with the Hulkster. Hogan says he'll give Sting 5 minutes to discuss the photo. We go to commercial break, and when we come back, Sting's been knocked out. Luger blames Hogan. Hogan and Bret blame Luger. No one knows who attacked the Stinger. Goldberg, Hogan and Sting were set to face Rick Steiner, Sid and DDP in a cage match in the main event. Sting arrives late to the match, and Luger tries to stop the Stinger from joining his teammates, but Sting goes anyway. The babyfaces win the match, and Luger argues with Sting afterwards. Lex is trying to tell Sting that it was Hogan who attacked him earlier on. So, we get the Fall Brawl. Sting versus Hogan is our main event, and the big question is, who can Sting trust? DDP interferes in the match, Bret Hart gets involved, Sid Vicious runs in too, and finally Lex Luger makes an appearance holding Sting's baseball bat. Hogan takes Luger out with a big boot, and Sting picks up the bat. Hogan tells Sting that Luger was lying all along. He wants Sting to hand over the bat, but Sting attacks Hogan and he turns heel. It was all a big setup. Hogan gets knocked out. He can't raise his hand for the third time while in the Scorpion Deathlock, so Sting wins the match and he becomes the new World Heavyweight Champion. He embraces Lex Luger afterwards, so not only did Sting turn heel at Fall Brawl, but so did Lex Luger. Luger hadn't worked as a heel in WCW since rejoining the company back in 1995. The next night, on the September 13th episode of Nitro, Sting and Lex confirmed their new heel status by attacking Ric Flair and by beating Bret Hart and Hulk Hogan in a tag team match. Luger used the baseball bat during the bout. So now we've established exactly where Lex Luger was and how he got up to this point. This is where it begins to get a little weird. Everything up to this point has been pretty straightforward stuff. We can talk about WCW's decision to turn Sting heel another time, because right now we're going to focus on the death of Lex Luger. Well, the death of Lex Luger as we knew him. On the 27th of September episode of Nitro, we get brought into a funeral home. We see a book of condolence with Lex Luger's name above it. In the sitting room, there's a lady with her face covered in a veil, and Lex Luger's in the coffin. We then see the ghost of Lex Luger leave his physical body, and the ghost talks to us. I'm not kidding. The ghost of Lex Luger says, "Here lies Lex Luger, a fine man, a great champion, but he's no longer with us." The lady walks towards the camera. We then go to the graveyard. The woman approaches Luger's grave, and once again, spooky Luger shows up. He watches the flowers getting thrown onto his casket, and then we go to the arena. Before we go on, can we please just take a moment to appreciate the ghost of Lex Luger? This is fucking nuts, and it also feels unnecessary.
Most likely because you were probably watching WWE. That segment aired on WCW.
Lex Luger, the total package, all that stuff.
Unless it aired during the 8 to 9 time frame.
This kind of thing works for
By
those
that point,
superstars who lean more towards
pretty sure most people were turning into Raw, WWE at 9 o'clock.
Strange. The lady walks out into the arena. She unveils herself as Miss Elizabeth as ominous music plays in the background. She walks down to the ring, and this all feels very grand. The darkened arena lights along with the music make it feel like something big's about to happen. Is this going to be some sort of supernatural version of Lex Luger? No, he's the exact same. Lex Luger is in the ring, and Tony Schiavone explains that the commentary team were told earlier that evening that Lex Luger is not to be called Lex Luger anymore. This is the total package. Nothing more, nothing less. Luger poses in the ring, showing off his body for the first time since making his return, and the commentators say this is the rebirth. Lex Luger is no more. You're expecting more, to be honest. The ghost thing was absolutely hilarious and silly, but it teased something big. Miss Elizabeth's entrance was good. It built up suspense for just a little moment. And well, the rest was really nothing we hadn't seen before, with the exception of Flexi Lexi's new muscular body. I don't know, some people may have liked this, but I think the payoff wasn't great. There's another major problem though. WCW could have left it like this and make fans tune in next week to learn more about this new Luger. Sorry, this
In a gaming
new
PC, how do people put the AIO up at the top of the case if it's exhaust fans? Good question, because it's actually counterintuitive. In a lot of gaming PCs, you'll see that the AIO radiator and fans up top, including in my own personal build, and this isn't actually the meta for CPU cooling. These fans are installed below the radiator in the exhaust position, meaning that they are pulling the hot air that's already inside your case, blowing it through the radiator and then out towards the top. You definitely wouldn't set these as intake fans because hot air rises and you don't want to suck in all of that falling dust. And we install them below the radiator so we can see that pretty RGB. But to min-max your CPU temperatures, placing your radiator up front would actually be better, or up on the side panel if it's a fish tank case. This way the fans are intaking fresh air from outside your case onto the radiator, which means that liquid temperature could get a little colder. But in reality, this usually equates to a less than 5-degree difference, so honestly the highest priority is usually just aesthetics. In a gaming PC, how do people put the AIO up at the top of the case if it's exhaust fans? Good question, because it's actually counterintuitive. In a lot of gaming PCs, you'll see that the AIO radiator and fans up top, including in my own personal build, and this isn't actually the meta for CPU cooling. These fans are installed below the radiator in the exhaust position, meaning that they are pulling the hot air that's already inside your case, blowing it through the radiator and then out towards the top. You definitely wouldn't set these as intake fans because hot air rises and you don't want to suck in all of that falling dust. And we install them below the radiator so we can see that pretty RGB. But to min-max your CPU temperatures, placing your radiator up front would actually be better, or up on the side panel if it's a fish tank case. This way the fans are intaking fresh air from outside your case onto the radiator, which means that liquid temperature could get a little colder. But in reality, this usually equates to a less than 5-degree difference, so honestly the highest priority is usually just aesthetics. In a gaming PC, how do people put the AIO up at the top of the case if it's exhaust fans? Good question, because it's actually counterintuitive. In a lot of gaming PCs, you'll see that the AIO radiator and fans up top, including in my own personal build, and this isn't actually the meta for CPU cooling. These fans are installed below the radiator in the exhaust position, meaning that they are pulling the hot air that's already inside your case, blowing it through the radiator and then out towards the top. You definitely wouldn't set these as intake fans because hot air rises and you don't want to suck in all of that falling dust. And we install them below the radiator so we can see that pretty RGB. But to min-max your CPU temperatures, placing your radiator up front would actually be better, or up on the side panel if it's a fish tank case. This way the fans are intaking fresh air from outside your case onto the radiator, which means that liquid temperature could get a little colder. But in reality, this usually equates to a less than 5-degree difference, so honestly the highest priority is usually just aesthetics. In a gaming PC, how do people put the AIO up at the top of the case if it's exhaust fans? Good question, because it's actually counterintuitive. In a lot of gaming PCs, you'll see that the AIO radiator and fans up top, including in my own personal build, and this isn't actually the meta for CPU cooling. These fans are installed below the radiator in the exhaust position, meaning that they are pulling the hot air that's already inside your case, blowing it through the radiator and then out towards the top. You definitely wouldn't set these as intake fans because hot air rises and you don't want to suck in all of that falling dust. And we install them below the radiator so we can see that pretty RGB. But to min-max your CPU temperatures, placing your radiator up front would actually be better, or up on the side panel if it's a fish tank case. This way the fans are intaking fresh air from outside your case onto the radiator, which means that liquid temperature could get a little colder. But in reality, this usually equates to a less than 5-degree difference, so honestly the highest priority is usually just aesthetics. In a gaming PC, how do people put the AIO up at the top of the case if it's exhaust fans? Good question, because it's actually counterintuitive. In a lot of gaming PCs, you'll see that the AIO radiator and fans up top, including in my own personal build, and this isn't actually the meta for CPU cooling. These fans are installed below the radiator in the exhaust position, meaning that they are pulling the hot air that's already inside your case, blowing it through the radiator and then out towards the top. You definitely wouldn't set these as intake fans because hot air rises and you don't want to suck in all of that falling dust. And we install them below the radiator so we can see that pretty RGB. But to min-max your CPU temperatures, placing your radiator up front would actually be better, or up on the side panel if it's a fish tank case. This way the fans are intaking fresh air from outside your case onto the radiator, which means that liquid temperature could get a little colder. But in reality, this usually equates to a less than 5-degree difference, so honestly the highest priority is usually just aesthetics. In a gaming PC, how do people put the AIO up at the top of the case if it's exhaust fans? Good question, because it's actually counterintuitive. In a lot of gaming PCs, you'll see that the AIO radiator and fans up top, including in my own personal build, and this isn't actually the meta for CPU cooling. These fans are installed below the radiator in the exhaust position, meaning that they are pulling the hot air that's already inside your case, blowing it through the radiator and then out towards the top. You definitely wouldn't set these as intake fans because hot air rises and you don't want to suck in all of that falling dust. And we install them below the radiator so we can see that pretty RGB. But to min-max your CPU temperatures, placing your radiator up front would actually be better, or up on the side panel if it's a fish tank case. This way the fans are intaking fresh air from outside your case onto the radiator, which means that liquid temperature could get a little colder. But in reality, this usually equates to a less than 5-degree difference, so honestly the highest priority is usually just aesthetics. In a gaming PC, how do people put the AIO up at the top of the case if it's exhaust fans? Good question, because it's actually counterintuitive. In a lot of gaming PCs, you'll
too. So this would lead you to think that all Ray had to do was ditch the Glacier gimmick and try something else, right? Surely it was just the Glacier gimmick that was holding him back, and a change of character. Here's a WCW blunder for you. Glacier, a Frosty fan favourite over on the Reliving the War series. Ray Lloyd got dealt a rough hand in terms of his WCW debut. Those who watched my channel and those who watched Nitro back in 1996 would remember the constant Blood Runs Cold vignettes and how Glacier's arrival in WCW was delayed over and over again. When Glacier was finally revealed through yet more vignettes, the character was met with indifference. The Mortal Kombat inspiration was painfully obvious, we don't need to get into all that, but the whole Glacier reveal also, in a way, represented a slight identity crisis for World Championship Wrestling. The NWO's arrival felt cutting edge. The lengths WCW went through to make the New World Order feel real was something that made fans pay close attention to Monday Nitro. And when you compare the unpredictability of this outlaw faction trying to take over a company to a Sub-Zero ripoff giving us martial arts demonstrations on top of his ice palace, then Glacier ends up looking passé before he even has a debut match. Glacier may have been a new wrestler, but it felt like he wouldn't have been out of place in WCW a few years prior. Still, the one thing that Ray Lloyd had going for him was the fact that he wasn't bad at all in the ring. He brought something new to the table in terms of his moveset, and while it's very easy for us to look back and laugh at the blatant Mortal Kombat ripoff, God knows I do it enough, but Glacier was spared becoming total meme material thanks to how well he performed in the ring. Also, those who have met Ray and spoke with Ray say that he's an awesome guy too. So this would lead you to think that all Ray had to do was ditch the Glacier gimmick and try something else, right? Surely it was just the Glacier gimmick that was holding him back, and a change of character would work wonders for this guy. Well, yeah, Glacier was gone by August of 1999, and Ray Lloyd sure did get himself a new gimmick, and somehow, I don't know how they did it, but somehow, WCW managed to give Ray something even worse than the Glacier character. This is just one of the downfalls that we're going to look at today. Here is the multiple downfalls of Glacier. This should be fun. Eric Bischoff said that Glacier was created as a WCW marketing project, and if that's the case, WCW seriously failed. Bischoff said the driving force behind the Glacier character was merchandising, things like action figures and video games. And I say WCW failed in that department because they didn't even bother bringing out an official Glacier action figure, and there was no Blood Runs Cold video game either. Yes, you may say Glacier was featured in WCW Revenge, but so was Jim Neidhart, and the Anvil didn't have to dress up like Sub-Zero to get a spot either. With that in mind, Glacier certainly wasn't the first gimmick created with the sole intention of selling merchandise, and Eric Bischoff did hold a lot of experience in sales and marketing. The intentions aren't the problem here, but the fact that Glacier only got this race car toy and not a fully fledged action figure kinda shows us that WCW shit the bed with its initial idea. You've got Wrath and Mortis too, again two good wrestlers portraying Glacier's biggest enemies, and they too wouldn't have looked out of place in a Mortal Kombat game or a Saturday morning cartoon. But as time went on, you could tell that nobody, not a single soul, knew what to do with the Glacier story arc. It was the NWO bringing in the merchandise money, not the Sub-Zero knockoff. So in terms of generating revenue, it made sense for the marketing department to put all their focus onto the NWO, and boy, did they ever go overboard.
NWO with a vertical GPU mount to make for a even nicer setup. Well, then stick with me because I'm going to show you how to number different parts, and you need to install the cable first of all onto the bracket. Now, the standard standoffs are set in the middle. You can also mount them further back if necessary, depending on your sort of GPU and the size of it. But for this build, we're using the 3090, which I found I didn't need to move it around, and it's in a good position for that. So in order to install it, we first need to install that cable, and then to remove the standard bracketing on the left-hand side, removing the relevant number of brackets from here that are going to be otherwise in the way of your graphics card when you go to mount it on the bracket. Now, it's worth noting that I accidentally removed too many and the wrong ones, so pay attention when you're doing that. But then what you need to do is just insert your GPU into the cable that you've installed on the bracket in the standard way that you would slot it into a PCIe X16 slot on your motherboard. There is a little plastic latch on the right hand side here which I found I had to slide out. Pay attention to that if you're struggling with getting your GPU into the bracket there, and then just push it down and seat it into the bracket and then secure it with the screws. So you want to make sure you put the two screws back in the end there to secure it back in place, and then put any of the brackets in if you've done what I have and ended up with one spare just knocking around an empty slot there. And then you've got what should be the finished product in terms of the GPU mounted to the bracket and ready to go into the case. Now, the reason that you can only use this bracket is because the 6500 has a thumb screw on the outside of the case which you unscrew, and then this whole bracket comes out down here. So rather than removing multiple PCIe brackets from the back of the case and then installing the bracket, you're removing an entire thing from the case just below the top. You then need to put the cable into the top PCIe X16 slot, so the one closest to the top of the motherboard, and then we're going to seat that bracket back down into the case. Now, if you look at the outside, you'll find there's a couple of hooks that hook into the external part of the case that you can see here, and then it lines up with that screw hole, so you need to put that screw back in place to secure the bracket into place. Now, quickly for the wiring logic of it, I'm using Corsair's RM Shift 1000X. Now, this is going to vary depending on GPU you have. So this power supply has 4 PCIe. There are some hooks on either side that you need to adjust, and then you need to push it into the slot and hook it over the plastic notch on there. And you obviously need a separate cable for each of these connectors, and you need to push them in firmly The other end plugs into the PCIe/CPU power connector on your power supply unit. I'm showing you this now so you can see it really clearly on where these cables will plug in. So it's got one strange angle. Bear that in mind. This is a British summer. It's been pretty hot, but the stress testing initially with a standard horizontal position, I used Port Royal, a number of games and other 3D Mark tests as well. And I found that it was usually getting around 60 degrees on the GPU, and that was the same while gaming. You'll notice that the hardware monitor stats show a max of 80 on the memory, 81 on the hotspot, and 68 on the graphics card, which isn't too bad in this format. Meanwhile, with the vertical GPU mount, and with the fans set to quiet, by the way, on both modes in the system, I then did some testing on Port Royal and other tests, and the stress testing basically ended up showing very similar results in terms of getting around 68 degrees GPU temperature during the stress test period. But I did note that the memory got hotter, so we had 94 degrees on the memory, but otherwise the GPU and the hotspot temps were roughly the same at the top end. So it doesn't seem to make a massive difference overall to the temps, and it does sit far enough away from the glass to not be throttled. So I think actually, if you're looking for an aesthetic change to your case, this is a pretty good choice. Hopefully you found this video useful.
NWO pins, multiple variations of the NWO shirt. It seemed like every other week new NWO merchandise was being advertised, and you know what? It made good business sense. Fans wanted to buy this stuff. The NWO brand was probably making more money than every other Superstars merchandise put together. What fans clearly didn't want to buy was a Glacier shirt, a Glacier replica helmet, or heaven forbid, a Glacier video game. The Blood Runs Cold storyline was nowhere near as successful as Eric Bischoff had hoped, but it did provide fans with a change of pace during WCW television shows. As big as the NWO were, fans weren't going to sit through full shows dominated by the New World Order, and Bischoff's attempts at creating NWO exclusive shows proves this. As silly as it was at times, the Blood Runs Cold storyline was different from everything else on WCW television, and I thought this was fine. It remained in the mid-card, it didn't eat up too much TV time, and we got to see some good performers in the ring while all this was going down. At the beginning of 1998, though, the company decided to end the Blood Runs Cold storyline and turn Glacier heel, because why the fuck not? It's not like the story was going anywhere at this point anyway. On the January 24th, 1998 episode of Saturday Night, Glacier turned on his friend Ernest Miller, and he let Mortis and Wrath score a tag team victory, which technically means Mortis and Wrath were the winners of the whole Blood Runs Cold feud. If you thought big things were on the horizon for the evil Frosty Balls, then you've got another thing coming. Glacier went on a losing streak after turning heel, made all the more noteworthy because he spent his debut year being undefeated in singles competition. It's usually at this point in a superstar's career when it all goes downhill. We have seen it countless times. An idea fails, but the guy's still on payroll, so just use him and get other people over. But WCW, to their credit, did try a few more times with Glacier. Still, those few months Glacier spent losing matches did him absolutely no favours. He was already perceived as a lower mid-card guy at this point, and losing to the likes of Steve Mongo McMichael and Prince Iaukea on Nitro didn't help matters. Another thing that didn't help too, Glacier would limit his moveset considerably when wrestling as a bad guy. The commentators even made a point of saying that Glacier was now focusing on pro wrestling and not martial arts. So one of the things that made Glacier stand out, one of the only redeemable qualities he had from a TV standpoint, was also taken away. And I get it, taking away fancy kicks and unique moves gives the crowd less opportunities to cheer, but WCW was also giving people more reason not to care about Glacier. Let's call everything we just talked about downfall number 1. The televised losing streak came to an end on May 11th, 1998 when Glacier got a win over Sick Boy, a member of Raven's flock. Before the match, Glacier cut a promo saying that one of the things he brought with him to WCW during his debut was the cryonic kick. Glacier felt like too many people were ripping off the move, but nobody could do it better than old Frosty Balls himself. So, if Glacier caught anyone trying to steal his finisher, no matter who it was, Glacier would take them out. After Glacier defeated Sick Boy, Perry Saturn hit the ring to launch an attack. On the 25th of May episode of Nitro, Glacier cut another promo where he said he knew there would be imitators when he brought the cryonic kick to WCW. Perry Saturn's running around saying his kick is better than the original and Glacier isn't gonna stand for it. Glacier mocks Saturn for how he dresses, that's ironic, and Glacier says what he created is something he can also destroy. So Glacier challenges Saturn to a match to see who has the best kick. The match happens later on Nitro, and it ended with Saturn performing the Death Valley Driver, not a kick. Brilliant. Saturn had another storyline going on. Raven was trying to get Saturn back in the flock, so Raven and his cronies were getting involved and causing distractions throughout this whole mini feud. On Thunder later in the week, Glacier wrestled Van Hammer. Glacier locked in the rings of Saturn during the match, so Saturn came down, he hit Glacier with a cryonic kick, and Glacier took another Death Valley Driver. The two would then trade victories over the next 2 episodes of Thunder. In the first match, Kanyon dressed up as a referee and he took out Saturn. Kanyon then pulled out the Mortis mask and he showed it to Glacier before Frosty Balls pinned Perry Saturn, but this was merely a tease and nothing more. On the following Thunder, Saturn defeated Glacier. The flock once again got involved and Glacier got distracted, but Saturn once again put Glacier away with a Death Valley Driver. And then Glacier faced Goldberg on the 29th of June 1998 episode of Nitro. This wasn't Glacier's first match with Bill Goldberg. The two had a match the month prior that ended in 2 minutes, and they had 2 other matches before that. But this one right here is a match that Ray Lloyd wouldn't forget. During the bout, Glacier suffered a knee injury, a pretty serious knee injury that would keep him out of action for around 5 months. It looks like this leg lock caused the injury. Glacier grabs his knee immediately after the move, but to his credit, he did finish the match. Goldberg, of course, won the bout after a spear and a jackhammer. Glacier would have to take some time off. He'd make his comeback on the November 5th episode of Thunder, and he offered his support to Ernest Miller. Miller had also turned heel by this point. Glacier was rocking some new gear too. Not sure if this was an improvement or not, but it sure was different. And Glacier said guys like he and Miller will never get a break in WCW, so the two should watch each other's backs. Ernest Miller didn't seem to care all that much. The next week, Glacier had his return match, once again on Thunder. He wrestled Chris Adams in the opening contest, but before the match would begin, Glacier once again said he's the originator of the cryonic kick, and guys like Chris Adams were ripping him off. Adams was actually credited as one of the first wrestlers to use the super kick. In the end, Adams hits Glacier with the kick, but Sonny Ono and Ernest Miller get involved. Glacier then shows off his new finisher afterwards, the ice pick. And yeah, Glacier's back in the opening matches of Thunder. Not exactly the comeback story of the year, but it's better than nothing. Monday Nitro on the 11th of November was a bit of a weird one. Raven refused to wrestle Wrath, so Kanyon jumped in the ring to begin his match with Glacier. Wrath ends up wiping out both Kanyon and Glacier, and this sets up a Wrath versus Glacier match at World War III. Good example though of how things had changed in WCW. Just a year earlier, these guys were way more in character in terms of the Blood Runs Code stuff, but at this point, all 3 men were very different. Anyway, at World War III, Wrath defeated Glacier, and this
in a
was
gaming
Glacier's...
PC, how do people put the AIO up at the top of the case if it's exhaust fans? Good question, because it's actually counterintuitive. In a lot of gaming PCs, you'll see that the AIO radiator and fans up top, including in my own personal build, and this isn't actually the meta for CPU cooling. These fans are installed below the radiator in the exhaust position, meaning that they are pulling the hot air that's already inside your case, blowing it through the radiator and then out towards the top. You definitely wouldn't set these as intake fans because hot air rises and you don't want to suck in.
Hello, this is the Provoked Prawn, and in this video I'm that people don't really know what the best thing to do is, and they're often criticising some of the placements, for example this side mounting, which is one of my favourites, because of a misunderstanding about air bubbles, and I'll get to that in a little bit. Is worth looking for. but it's talking about the placement of a radiator in such a position that you could potentially damage the pump. Now, for most radiators, all-in-one systems like this, the pump is on the block that attaches to the CPU. In this build, you can see the radiators on the bottom and the pump is therefore at the top. Now, over time, coolant will naturally dissipate from your radiator, which means the air bubbles will form, and those air bubbles could eventually work their way into the pump head because air rises naturally. And obviously, in the system, that could then mean a problem because the pump will then be running on air instead of liquid, which could theoretically damage and break it and then render it inoperable. And obviously, it won't be cooling your CPU anymore, which would be terrible news for your system and could lead to some problems. Now, this will take a number of years to happen unless you're aggressively using it all the time, but it is potentially an issue, so one to bear in mind. Now, I front mounted a radiator recently with a push-pull setup and did tubes down, and I still had people making that same comment saying that I'd done it wrong. Now, actually, if you look at this logic here, the block is still below the top of the radiator. So essentially, the worst that would happen here, if that same sort of logic occurred over time, is that the air bubbles would rise to the top of the radiator and just get stuck at the top of the radiator. They couldn't travel necessarily into the pump because that isn't the highest point. So as long as your CPU block isn't the highest point in the system, then it shouldn't be a problem because those bubbles will end up just sort of at the top. And this is why Gamers Next has recommended tubes down in this sort of logic. I didn't personally like this design, this view. It doesn't look very nice. And I have found with sort of push-pull and change some things. So what I was going to do here is set up 3 different formats and then benchmark and test it for thermal because of the current position of the system. But I wanted to go through and be thorough with each of these and test out each of the logics. So here you can see hardware monitor at the same time so we can get an idea of the sort of temperatures of the system, the GPU and the CPU, because obviously this isn't all about the CPU cooling. You obviously want to keep your GPU cool as well and the other parts in your system too, because that's important for the airflow, is to keep everything cool so it runs nice and smooth. So I'm obviously aggressively testing here. Now with the push-pull setup, you can see we've got a maximum of 78 degrees C on the CPU, and the GPU is around 65 degrees, 90 degrees on the memory, and 77 at the hotspot. So reasonable. And then when you drop into the standard mounting, so we haven't got push-pull anymore, now the CPU temperature has gone up to 82 degrees, GPU's at 66 degrees on the GPU and 90 on the memory. So both things are a little bit warmer, which is to be expected because we've now got less fans. But then with the top mounting, what I found is interesting is the CPU temperature's gone up and the GPU's marginally different as well. So obviously you can go back and compare these. But essentially I was actually quite surprised that what I would usually default to, which is the top mounting, is actually a little bit toastier. Now this isn't necessarily the be-all and end-all because it's going to vary from case to case and obviously different systems, different environments. You can see the Corsair 5000D airflow here, for example. 360mm radiator on top, probably preferable. Now, when mounting a radiator, you also need to think about other things like the placement of your tubes. I've already said about tubes down. Obviously, with top mounting, the pump is in the lower point, so that's fine. But you can see sometimes you might have to think about the positioning of the tube so it doesn't block your RAM and doesn't interfere with exhaust or intake fans. So you can see another setup here where the tubes are towards the front. And that was pretty decent cooling. That's in the LAN cool case. I've done videos on all of these. And the performance was actually really nice there too. Generally speaking, I'd say that actually top mounting is preferable, despite the fact that my benchmarks have actually shown it is a little bit warmer. Or as I said, the other logic of side mounting. Now this is an air case, which obviously a lot more fans. So I've got the front fans intaking, the fans on the radiator intaking, the fans on the bottom intaking, and then we're just exhausting out of the top. So I'm pulling cold air over the radiator, pulling cold air into the case, blowing that onto the GPU. I've talked about the logic of fan placement and the sort of where you should position your fans and the direction you should put them in order to maximize airflow and ensure that everything runs cool. So we'll link to that video in the description. But I usually end up with intake on the front, the side panel and the bottom where possible, and then exhaust out the top and the rear. And I find that overall in a variety of different cases this makes for the best performance, but it's not always possible. In that NZXT case, for example, there were no bottom fan options. You cannot put fans on the bottom, so you are quite limited. And in my experience, generally, if you front mount a radiator, you are kind of choking off the rest of the case. But actually, My tests show that isn't always the case, but there are so many variables in this that it obviously is going to fluctuate. So it is worth experimenting yourself. Just don't bottom mount, because that's a bad plan. Hopefully you found these insights useful. Let me know in the comments if you've got any questions. Subscribe if you haven't already for more awesome content. Thanks for watching. You've made it right to the end of the video, you brilliant legend you. If you've enjoyed it, click that subscribe button, give me a thumbs up, and drop me a comment down below if you've got any questions. If you really enjoyed it, consider joining the channel and see the benefits of doing so. Check out these other videos. You might well find them interesting or useful. And most importantly, have a great life.
How do you configure your fans in a gaming PC? This has the potential to be super complicated, but this is the super quick and easy explanation. In general, you want either the same amount of intake and exhaust fans, or sometimes one or two more intake than exhaust. This is the airflow direction of a case fan. Usually the ugly sticker is on the back side of the fan, not the intake side. Again, there's certainly some exceptions, but this is generalized advice. A very common setup is to have a few fans up at the front as intake, or on the side if you have one of those fish tank cases, and then one in the back as an exhaust. 3 in the front, 1 in the back, that's perfectly fine positive airflow pressure. If you have any fans up at the top, you always want them to be exhausting air out the top. If they were intake, then they'd be sucking all that dust falling down, which would be no bueno. That's the most basic way to explain it. There's 1,000 alternatives and optimizations that you can make though. How do you configure your fans in a gaming PC? This has the potential to be super complicated, but this is the super quick and easy.
Hello, this is the Provoked Prawn, and in this video I'm here to talk to you about all-in-one radiator placement, as in where to position your cooler to get maximum performance. Now, I've built a number of different PCs over the last few years, and I've tried out a variety of different positions: top mounting, front mounting,
Yo, I'm about to switch my camera. Oh, you can see that. Oh, 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 there it is. E580. If it is quite a bit faster, has a good amount of VRAM, sometimes you could take advantage of upscaling or anything like that, even if it means playing at 1080p on a 1440p monitor. I still think 1440p is a good option nowadays. I get Intel's point here. I think they're completely valid. And NVIDIA and AMD even marketing a GPU like a 4060 at like $300, even though they call it a 1080p GPU, it's like, come on, man. Like, you couldn't have made something better than this. That's where I'm at with it, but it gets me excited that Intel is actually trying to push for 1440p here. And if it can handle it, cool. We won't know until we know. But what's interesting is if you look at the specs, I keep clicking the wrong ones. You can actually see that 20 Xe cores and 5 render slices and 20 ray tracing units. And if you do the conversions and all that kind of stuff, it's kind of weird because if you compare it to Intel's last generation card, the B580 is actually a smaller die. Like, it has less cores and stuff on it. And you might be wondering, like, why did Intel do that? Because they are still getting faster performance. Just because they're putting less cores on this one doesn't